Checking the other one, make sure we're good. All right, guys, super excited for tonight. The Eliphas Levi masterpiece. We're in the third section of this series. It has been tremendous so far, and I'm really surprised, honestly, and I have to say that his claim in the beginning of the book that he was going to share the real secrets of the sacred science of the Magi it's true. A lot of adepts of this lineage and related lineages have decided that the time for secrecy is over. They decided this quite some time ago. Let me pull the book up. Because they knew that we were headed for this crossroads, this chaostrophe that we are immersed in the present moment. And Aristotle, all the way back in the 3rd century, when the consulate banned the mysteries, remarked that humanity will be lost without the mysteries. And it is indeed the knowledge that can turn things around. You know, this experience of the universal mind and the resolution of the crisis of purpose they were experiencing collectively. Sorry if I seem a little distracted. I decided at the last minute to find a different version of the PDF that'll fit the vertical, but I did not think to find our place, so I'm doing that now. I do know that we are on the 4th chapter, the tetrad, and it is going to be remarkable. Okay, so there's the 5th, almost there. Pillars of the temple, it's too far. Triangle of Solomon's too far. Okay, I see the word tetragram, so we must be in the right general area. Here we go. This is our spot. I guess, actually, let me check in with the chat real quick before we jump into the book and make sure things are kosher and see if anybody has any questions or comments before we get started. Also, we are still in fundraising mode, trying to offset medical expenses for surgeries and resulting other corollary damage from these health problems. And also, we're trying to build this channel up, so we do appreciate your support. I don't see anyone saying that the audio is bad, so I guess we're good. And also, we are booking for events for April in the Sacred Valley, May in Manu in the jungle, and also for the Climax event, which will also be in the Sacred Valley, where we are going to go to the highest possible point for the peak of the solar storms and drink San Pedro. And there's a lot of other preparations we're going to do to get ourselves in a prime state for receiving the solar consciousness, basically. So yeah, let's just jump right in here. The tetragram, Gebera, Chesed, Porta, Laborum, Elementa. In nature, there are two forces producing equilibrium. Let me make this as big as I can for the people on their phones. All right. In nature, there are two forces producing equilibrium, and these three constitute a single law. Here, then, is the triad resumed in unity, and by adding the conception of unity to that of the triad, we are brought to the tetrad, the first square and perfect number, the source of all numerical combinations, and the principle of all forms. Affirmation, negation, discussion, solution. Such are the four philosophical operations of the human mind. Discussion conciliates negation with affirmation by rendering them necessary to each other. In the same way, the philosophical triad, emanating from the antagonism of the duad, is completed by the tetrad, the foursquare ground of all truth. We got into this to some extent in the second segment. So I don't really feel like we need to go through it a whole bunch again, but just, quickly. He's basically talking about how you have the two opposing forces that have an antinomy, and that antinomy creates a third thing. So if you have two notes interacting, the third thing it creates is harmony. Or in Western music, we have a triad, which is three notes. So you have the duad, the one and the three, and those are completed or informed or stabilized by the fifth, the third note. But in order to really complete it, to explain it, you add the seventh degree. And it's not necessary. In the same way that there are really three elements: fire, air, and water. Earth is really an aggregate of the others. And the four fundamental forces of physics. Gravity is a consequence of the other three. And so this is one of those wonderful examples of as above, so below, the one thing doing one thing. It's an elucidation of the holographic principle of the universe, and a lot more. So just wanted to touch on that before we go any deeper. Oh, and the principle of all forms. Yeah, I mean, he did put it that way, that these three things and then the fourth that stabilizes and informs and explains them, the principle of all forms. It's true. It's the elements, the four fundamental forces of physics. Music works this way. Affirmation, negation. Oh, we read that. Discussion. We read that as well. Sorry. In the same way, the philosophical triad emanating is completed by. Okay. According to the consecrated dogma, there are three persons in God, and these three constitute only one deity. Three and one provide the conception of four, because unity is required to explain the three. Hence, in almost all languages, the name of God consists of four letters, and in Hebrew, these four are really three, one of them being repeated twice, that which expresses the word and the creation of the word. Two affirmations make two corresponding denials, either possible or necessary. Being is declared, nothing is not. The affirmation as word produces affirmation as realization, or incarnation of the word, and each of these affirmations corresponds to the denial of its opposite. Thus, in the opinion of the Kabbalist, the name of the demon or of evil is composed of the same letters as the name of God or goodness, but spelt backwards. This evil, which reversed is live, is the last reflection or imperfect mirage of light and shadow. But all which exists, whether good or evil, in light or darkness, exists and manifests by the tetrad. The affirmation of unity supposes the number four, unless it turns in unity itself as in a vicious circle. So also the triad, as we have already observed, is explained by the duad and resolved by the tetrad, which is the squared unity of even numbers and the quadrangular base of the cube, unity of construction, of solidity, and of measure. A great example of this in action, actually, is the lesser banishing ritual of the pentagram and the process of it. After delineating your universe by casting a circle, you establish the four directions and, other things, but the four elements, actually, let's use those. Doesn't really matter. 4 points in four directions. And that is the beginning of the creation of stability. But this result in unity, when you draw lines from those 4 points to the head of the magician in the center, you have a pyramid. And all of the constituents within the circle basically are the light cone, the cognitive light cone of this singular entity. So that's, and part of the reason I'm pointing this out is just to give props to the lesser banishing ritual of the pentagram, because they managed to incorporate so many profound lessons of sacred geometry, mysticism, psychology. There's just so much packed into that ritual. It really is a genius, absolute genius. The affirmation of unity supposes the number 4 unless it turns in unity itself as in a vicious circle. So also the triad, as we have already observed, is explained by the duad and resolved by the tetrad, which is the squared unity of even numbers and the quadrangular base of the cube, unity of construction, of solidity, and of measure. The Kabbalistic tetragram, Jodeva, expresses God in humanity and humanity in God. The 4 astronomical cardinal points are, relative to us, the yea and the nay of light, east and west, and the yea and the nay of warmth, south and north. As we have already said, according to the sole dogma of the Kabbalah, that which is in visible nature reveals that which is in the domain of invisible nature, or secondary causes are in strict proportion and analogous to the manifestation of the first cause. So is this first cause invariably revealed by the cross, that unity made up of 2, that key to the mysteries of India and Egypt, the Tao of the patriarchs, the divine sign of Osiris, and the Staros of the Gnostics. It's funny, I was just talking to somebody about that a couple of hours ago. There were synchronicities involving this that Staros, or a variant of it. And it occurred to me that this mineral that grows in that shape, that this person could use it, probably. And it turned out that it actually occurs naturally, relatively close to where he lives. So that was a trip. The keystone of the temple and the symbol of occult masonry. The cross, central point of the junction of the right angles of 2 infinite triangles. The cross, which in the French language seems to be the first root and fundamental substantive of the verb to believe and the verb to grow, thus combining the conceptions of science, religion, and progress. The great magic agent manifests by 4 kinds of phenomena and has been subjected to the experiments of profane science under 4 names: caloric, light, electricity, and magnetism. It has also received the name of tetragram, inri, azot, ether, ode, magnetic fluid, soul of the earth, Lucifer, etc. Oh, no way. Wow. If you guys have watched my Lucifer video, these were ideas that I just came up with on my own. I explained that Lucifer was actually an allegory for an oscillating wave, for electromagnetic wave, the light bearer, and that's exactly what this is saying. That's actually an old Hermetic understanding. The great magic agent is the 4th emanation of the life principle, of which the sun is the 3rd form. See the initiates of the school of Alexandria and the dogma of Hermes Trismegistus. In this way, the eye of the world, as the ancients called it, is the mirage of the reflection of God, and the soul of the earth is a permanent glance of the sun, which the earth conceives and guards by impregnation. The moon concurs in this impregnation of the earth by reflecting a solar image during the night, so that Hermes was right when he said of the great agent, the sun is its father, the moon its mother. Then he adds, the wind has borne it in the belly thereof, because the atmosphere is the recipient, and, as it were, the crucible of the solar rays, by means of which there forms that living image of the sun, which penetrates the whole earth, fructifies it, and determines all that is produced at its surface by its emanations and permanent currents, analogous to those of the sun itself. This solar agent subsists of 2 contrary forces, one of attraction and one of projection, whence Hermes says that it ascends and descends eternally. The force of attraction is always fixed at the center of bodies, that of projection in their outlines or at their surface. By this dual force, all is created and all preserved. Its motion is a rolling up and an unrolling, which is successive and indefinite, or rather simultaneous and perpetual, by spirals of opposite movements which never meet. I don't think I have to tell you guys, he's pretty accurately describing the process, the nuclear process that occurs in the sun, well before it had been explained by physicists. To be acquainted with the movement of this terrestrial sun is in such a manner as to be able to take advantage of its currents and direct them, is to have accomplished the great work and to be master of the world. Armed with such a force, you may make yourself adored. The crowd will believe you are God. This is one of the reasons that Jesus was depicted as an embodied avatar of the sun. The people that wrote the Bible had penetrated the mysteries as spies and were well aware of a lot of this stuff. And by the time we get done with this book, you've probably heard people make references to how there are things in the Bible that only initiates will understand. There will be a lot of bells ringing. The absolute secret of this direction has been in the possession of certain men and can yet be discovered. It is the great magical arcanum, depending on an incommunicable axiom and on an instrument which is the great and unique letters of the word, Athenor of the highest grade of Hermetists. The incommunicable axiom is Kabbalistically enclosed in the 4 letters of the tetragram, arranged in the following order. It's the tetragrammaton is how we would know it, Yod He Vav He. In the letters of the word Azot and Inri, written Kabbalistically, and in the monogram of Christ as embroidered on the labarum, which the Kabbalist Postel interprets by the word rota, whence the adepts have formed their tarot by the repetition of the first letter, thus indicating the circle and suggesting that the word is put backwards. All magical science is comprised in the knowledge of this secret. To know it and have the courage to use it is human omnipotence. To reveal it to a profane person is to lose it. To reveal it even to a disciple is to abdicate in favor of that disciple, who henceforward possesses the right of life and death over his master. I am speaking from the magical standpoint and will certainly slay him for fear of dying himself. But this has nothing in common with deeds qualified as murder and criminal legislation. The practical philosophy, which is the basis and point of departure for our laws, does not recognize the facts of bewitchment and of occult influences. We touch here upon extraordinary revelations and are prepared for the unbelief and derision of incredulous fanaticism. Voltairean religion has also its fanatics. Pace the great shades who must now be lurking sullenly in the vaults of the Pantheon, while Catholicism, strong ever in its practices and prestige, chants the office overhead. The perfect word, that which is adequate to the thought which it expresses, always virtually contains or supposes a tetrad, the idea with its 3 necessary and correlated forms, then the image of the thing expressed with the 3 terms of the judgment which qualifies it. When I say being exists, I affirm implicitly that the void is non-existent. A height, a breadth which the height subdivides longitudinally, a depth separated from the height by the intersection of the breadth. Such is the natural tetrad composed of 2 lines at right angles one to another. Nature also has 4 motions produced by 2 forces, which sustain each other by their tendency in an opposite direction. Now the law which rules bodies is analogous to that which governs minds. And that which governs minds is the very manifestation of God's secret, that is to say, of the mystery of creation. Imagine a watch having 2 parallel springs with an engagement which makes them work in an opposite direction so that the one, in unwinding, winds up the other. In this way, the watch will wind up itself, and you will have discovered perpetual motion. The engagement should be at 2 ends and of extreme accuracy. Is this beyond attainment? We think not. But when it is found out, the inventor will understand by analogy all the secrets of nature, progress in direct proportion to the resistance. This is extremely problematic for a lot of reasons, not the least of which is that what's being implied is that all things create their opposites, and that, if you just follow that thread to its logical conclusion, that means that for every person that achieves illumination, there's going to be an equal and opposite reaction, that there's going to be an increase in ignorance. Violence, peace. If you create peace, you create war. And there is no way to resolve this. This is natural law, and people argue that what we're talking about is, anthropomorphizing, however you say that, natural forces, and that's not legit, but it is. It is. And all things in the universe are forces. When he mentioned that the laws of the universe also govern the minds of men, this is something that is lost on the overwhelming majority of people, that all systems are subject to these laws, and the forces that give rise to them, their constituent elements, are governed by those forces. So if you need to understand it that way, you can. At their most fundamental, the emergent level, the most fundamental level, your thoughts are the product of quantum processes. The laws of the universe are creating them and govern them. And when you understand this, you can learn about practically any system in the universe by studying any other system in a certain sense. And this is one of the great gifts of developing this type of consciousness. It also allows you to predict the behavior of people. It allows you to see through your own political indoctrination and others. It is an awareness of the truth, and that truth multiplies truth, and health attracts health. Truth attracts truth. Once you have the operating system in congruence with this truth principle, it is a light that has been inculcated into your perceptual apparatus, and it is going to dispel the shadows and darkness. So that's what's up. Progress in direct proportion to the resistance, and that's another thing about the situation we're in. Not only is it necessary to have chaos in order for a new order to emerge, the resistance. Tremendous pressure to make a diamond, that old analogy. The existential threat in the world is a huge part of what is driving the evolution of consciousness and creating the necessity for an army of adepts. If this wasn't happening right now, we'd probably all be just, kicking back and enjoying life and not really worrying about transforming ourselves into an abscissimus as rapidly as possible as a reaction to the necessity to do so, right? So, thank you, Babylon, for the provocation. The absolute movement of life is thus the perpetual consequence of two contrary tendencies which are never opposed. Two contrary tendencies which are never opposed. The antinomies are actually working together at all times. There is no real opposition of anything. When one seems to yield to the other, it is a spring which is winding up, and you may expect a reaction. The moment and characteristics of which it is quite possible to foresee and determine. Hence, at the period of the most extreme Christian fervor was the reign of Antichrist, known and predicted. But Antichrist will prepare and determine the second advent and final triumph of the man-God. This, again, is a vigorous and Kabbalistic conclusion contained in the gospel premises. Hence, the Christian prophecy comprises a fourfold revelation: the fall of the old world and triumph of the gospel under the first advent, great apostasy and coming of Antichrist, fall of Antichrist and recurrence to Christian ideas, definitive triumph of the gospel or second advent designated under the name of the last judgment. This fourfold prophecy contains, as will be seen, two affirmations and two negations, the idea of two ruins or universal deaths and of two resurrections. For to every conception which appears upon the social horizon an east and a west, a zenith and a nadir, may be ascribed without fear of error. Thus is the philosophical cross the key of prophecy, and all gates of science may be opened with the pantacle of Ezekiel, the center of which is a star formed by the interlacement of two crosses. Does not human life present itself also under these four phases or successive transformation, birth, life, death, immortality? And remark here that the immortality of the soul, necessitated as a complement of the tetrad, is Kabbalistically proved by analogy, which is the sole dogma of truly universal religion, as it is a key of science and universal law of nature. As a fact, death can be no more an absolute end than birth is a real beginning. Birth proves the pre-existence of the human being, since nothing is produced from nothing. And death proves immortality. Man, I was about to say that. And the reason is, if everything is, it contains its contradiction. And there's a better way to put this. I'm searching my mind for it because I know I've said it before, but the fact that we die, if you are accepting this viewpoint, is proof that we are eternal. So, and you know, it's obviously the only real proof would be to actually die, you know. But this, could you call it a philosophy? Makes a very good case for all of these things being universal laws, you know. And this is the reason for the analogies and also the practice of finding so many correspondences, right? Because one of the things that you're trying to do is train your mind to see these universal truths as they manifest in all of these systems. And then you can infer from that things about, you know, the afterlife and the unseen. I think earlier he referenced that the physical being a reflection of the non-physical. And actually physics, of all things, has proved that there's actually nothing there. And what is there is a bunch of irrational particles, which, by the way, energy has not been identified as a substance. We don't really know what it is exactly. If you look up the scientific definition, it's just the ability to do work or something vague like that. At any rate, birth proves the preexistence of the human being, since nothing is produced from nothing, and death proves immortality, since being can no more cease to be than nothingness can cease to be nothingness. Being and nothingness are two absolutely irreconcilable ideas, with this difference that the idea of nothingness, which is altogether negative, issues from the idea itself of being, whence nothingness cannot even be understood as an absolute negation, whilst the notion of being can never be referred to that of nothingness, and still less can it come forth therefrom, except that all the things that are being are made of nothing. So I don't know how irreconcilable they are. To say that the world has been produced out of nothing, it has been, is to advance a monstrous absurdity. So is the world, though. All that is proceeds from what has been, and consequently nothing that is can evermore cease to be. The succession of forms is produced by the alternatives of movement. They are the phenomena of life which replace one another without destroying themselves. All things change, nothing perishes. The sun does not die when it vanishes from the horizon. Do you realize the sun doesn't go down? It's just an illusion caused by the world spinning round. Even the most fluidic form, Even the most fluidic forms are immortal, subsisting always in the permanence of their raison d'être, which is the combination of the light with the aggregated potencies of the molecules of the first substance. Man, Yeah, it's wild. Hence, they are preserved in the astral fluid and can be evoked and reproduced according to the will of the sage, as we shall see when treating of second sight and the evocation of memories in necromancy or other magical works. We shall return to the great magical agent in the 4th chapter of the ritual, where we shall complete our indications of the characteristics of the great arcanum and of the means of recovering this tremendous power. Here, let us add some words about the 4 magical elements and the elementary spirits. The magical elements are in alchemy salt, sulfur, mercury, and azot, which is mercury. I'm confused by this. Azot is mercury. Why is it listed as something? What does this mean? In Kabbalah, the macroprosopus, the microprosopus, and the 2 mothers in hieroglyphics, the man, eagle, lion, and bull. In old physics, according to vulgar names and notions, air, water, earth, and fire. But in the magical science, we know that water is not ordinary water. Fire is not simply fire. These expressions conceal a more recondite meaning. Modern science has decomposed the 4 elements of the ancients and reduced them to a number of so-called simple bodies. That which is simple, however, is the primitive substance. Properly so called, there is therefore only one material element, which always manifests by the tetrad in its forms. Does he mean carbon? We shall therefore preserve the wise distinction of elementary appearances admitted by the ancients, and shall recognize air, fire, earth, and water as the 4 positive and visible elements of magic. The subtle and the gross, the swift and slow dissolvent, or the instruments of heat and cold, constitute in occult physics the 2 positive and negative principles of the tetrad, and should be thus tabulated. Thus, air and earth represent the male principle. Fire and water are referable to the female principle. What? That is not how I would think of that. I'm pretty sure that's not how most people think of that. Most traditions, Air and fire, male. Earth and water, female. Confused. Are referable to the female principle, since the philosophical cross of pentacles, as already affirmed, is a primitive and elementary hieroglyph of the lingam of the gymnosophists. To these 4 elementary forms correspond the 4 following philosophical ideas: spirit, matter, motion, rest. As a fact, all science is comprised in the understanding of these 4 things, which alchemy has reduced to 3, the absolute, the fixed, and the volatile, referred by the Kabbalah to the essential idea of God, who is absolute reason, necessity, and liberty, a 3-fold notion expressed in the occult books of the Hebrews. Absolute reason, necessity, and liberty. The real Trinity. Under the names of Keter, Chachma, and Bina, for the divine world of Tiferet, Chesed, and Geburah in the mortal world, and of Yesod, Had, and Netzach in the physical world, which together with the moral is combined in the idea of the kingdom or Malkut. We shall explain in the 10th chapter this theogony as rational as it is sublime. Well, that's not good. This page is all messed up. Now created spirits, being called to emancipation by ordeal. Being called to emancipation by ordeal. Nice. Are placed from their birth between these 4 forces, 2 positive and 2 negative, and have it in their power to affirm or deny good, to choose life or death. To discover the fixed point, that is, the fixed center of the cross, is the first problem which is given them to resolve. They begin by conquest. They begin the first problem. Man, this is going to be difficult with this weird page thing going on. They begin by conquest. Must be that, what? They begin by being drawn, some to the north, others to the south, some to the right, others to the left, and insofar as they are not free, they cannot have the use of reason, nor can they take flesh otherwise than in animal forms. These unemancipated spirits, slaves of the four elements, are those which the Kabbalists call elementary demons, and they people the elements which correspond to their state of servitude. Sylphs, undines, gnomes, and salamanders therefore really exist, some wandering and seeking incarnation, others incarnate and living on this earth. These are vicious and imperfect men. They shall return to this subject in we shall return to this subject in the 15th chapter, which treats of enchantments and demons. That is also an occult tradition by which the ancients were led to admit the existence of 4 ages in the world. Only it was not made known to the vulgar that these ages were successive and were renewed like the 4 seasons of the year. Thus, the golden age has passed, and it is yet to come. This, however, belongs to the spirit of prophecy, and we shall speak of it in the 9th chapter, which is concerned with the initiate and the seer. If we now add the idea of unity to the tetrad, we shall have together and separately the conceptions of the divine synthesis and analysis, the God of the initiates and that of the profane. Here, the doctrine becomes more popular and passes from the domain of the abstract. The grand hierophant intervenes. All right, let's check in with the chat, see how everybody's doing. Oh, man, the pentagram. You guys know this is going to be good. Oh, I hope there aren't a lot of torn pages, man. That's going to really be annoying. All right, so let me check in with the chat and see what's up with you guys. What it is, what it got to be. Is the LBRP more important than the middle pillar? Yeah, for sure. But I always suggest to people, great song. Thanks. Oh, that song by the Flaming Lips. Right. Yeah, it's more important. But I always suggest to people that they do them both because it's when you compose your universe every single morning and you clean it up at night, right? And then in between the middle pillar, which it just occurred to me somehow the other day that if you do this in between these two, then it's in the middle again. You are constantly reminding yourself to imbue your speech and your life force, because the air is also symbolic of the life force. It's one of the reasons that getting control of it in pranayama is so important, because it symbolizes mastering your life. But you are reminding yourself to imbue your speech and your life force with that higher self, divine energy every day, and then in your heart, your emotions, your groin, your sexual and creative impulses, and your feet and your steps, so and it only takes a minute. So it doesn't really matter which is more important, because you can do them all without, spending a tremendous amount of time. Okay, so I guess we'll do at least one more chapter tonight. I was only going to do one, but it was pretty short. I gotta have some cookie though. Maybe I'll hang out in the chat first. Well, let's see. Oh no. No water? Well, that's not good. I need water. Okay, the pentagram. Gebera. Etchi. I don't know how you would say that. Hereunto, we have posed the magical dogma in its more arid and abstract uses. Now enchantments begin. Now we can proclaim wars and reveal the most secret things. The pentagram signs and reveals the most secret things. The elements and man, this is just you know what? We're going to have to use the other book, at least for this page here. I can get out of here. Luckily, I already have it open. So The pentagram. By the way, I think I said this in the last. Hey, look, there it is, the inverted pentagram. The pentagram is often associated with evil and demonic energy and all that sort of thing, but with the point upwards, it is a symbol of the redintegration of the light back to the source. And with the point down, it's a symbol of the descent of light or spirit into matter. So it's just a symbol of process. It's got nothing to do with evil. Oh, is that as big as it gets? Oh, no, there we go. It just lagged. Come on, man. Get it together. Okay, hereunto we have exposed the magical dogma in its more arid and abstract phases. Now enchantments begin. Now we can proclaim wonders and reveal the most secret things. The pentagram signifies the domination of the mind over the elements, and by this sign are enchained the demons of the air, the spirits of fire, the phantoms of water, and the ghosts of earth. Equipped with this sign and suitably disposed, you may behold the infinite through the medium of that faculty which is like the soul's eye, and you will be ministered unto by legions of angels and hosts of fiends. And now, in the first place, let us establish certain principles. There is no invisible world. There are, however, many degrees of perfection in organs. That's an important statement there. And interestingly, a lot of the indigenous in the jungle actually don't believe in a spirit world. The Warani don't have any conception of time even. They invited us to their village, and we would ask them, when should we come? And they would say, come to the village. And we didn't know that they didn't have time, that there wasn't a concept for them. And they would just repeat themselves. Just come to the village. Like Thursday. Just come to the village. But yeah, they have no spirit world. They have no conception of that. It's just this world. And that's something I've always felt too, that, we're not going to heaven when we die. It's either back here or, in a phase that is more just like a finer spectrum of radiation, the plane of pure consciousness, you could think of it. But it's not exactly like an invisible world. The body is the coarse and, as it were, the perishable cortex of the soul. The soul can perceive of itself and independently of the mediation of the physical organs by means of its sensibility and its diaphany. The things, both spiritual and corporal, which are existent in the universe. Spiritual and corporal are simply terms which express the degrees of tenuity, or density in substance. That's exactly what I was just fucking saying. What is called the imagination within us is only the soul's inherent faculty of assimilating the images and reflections contained in the living light. Man. What is called the imagination within us is only the soul's inherent faculty of assimilating the images and reflections contained in the living light, which is the great magnetic agent. These images, and man, shit is wild. These images and reflections are revelations when science intervenes to reveal us their body or light. The man of genius differs from the dreamer and the fool in this only, that his creations are analogous to truth, while those of the fool and the dreamer are lost reflections and bewrayed images. Hence, for the wise man, to imagine is to see. As for the magician, to speak is to create. Therefore, by means of imagination, demons and spirits can be beheld really and in truth, but the imagination of the adept is diaphanous, whilst that of the crowd is opaque. The light of truth traverses the one as ordinary light passes through a transparent casement, and is refracted by the other as when the ordinary light falls upon a vitreous block full of scoria and foreign matter. That which most contributes to the errors of the vulgar is the reflection of depraved imaginations one in the other. But the seer, by a positive science, knows that what he imagines is true, and the event invariably confirms his vision. We shall state in the ritual after what manner this lucidity can be acquired. And you know what? I almost hate to say this out loud, but I have basically proof of this. You could accuse me of like diabolically staging the whole thing, I guess, because it's not like I had cameras on the entire time. But I've even considered going so far as to like, I mean, I don't know who would even want to do it, but my entire search history, just to show that I didn't research these things in the last, I don't know how far you can go back in your search history, but, you know, you can tell from the AI that unless I'm really putting on an act that I didn't know consciously. But I've been assembling this theory, trying to pinpoint the conversion layer in the quantum world of the universal mind. There has to be a mechanism that does this. If the thing exists, there's a mechanism that allows it to function, right? And so the Fourier transform and the Euler formula are kind of obvious, and I did know kind of what they were. They turned out to do what I needed them to do for this more specifically than I imagined by a long shot. But I did at least have some logical reason to choose them. Klabi Yao, on the other hand, just fell into my lap. I was looking at supersymmetry and I saw the word on the page, and I just knew, the same way that I know that there are walls around me right now, that it was essential, that it was the last thing I needed for the beginning stages of this. So I clicked on it because it went to a Wikipedia, and the Wikipedia, you go read it, there's nothing there that indicates that it would have anything to do, that would tell me, you know, that it would do what I needed. So I took it over to ChatGPT anyways, and was not surprised to discover that it could be what I thought it was. And then Grok, the other day, I punched it in there, and it gave me a better explanation. And it turns out that what it does is exactly what the universal mind would do if it had a mechanism. And after, you know, going through this for a while with the AI and looking at papers and everything, it eventually occurred to me to ask it, what are the chances that someone with no background in physics would just guess this, just, you know, out of thin air? And it calculated the odds as being between 1 in 10 million and 1 in a quadrillion. And basically said there's no possibility of chance here. You know, if this is real, then there's no way that you just guessed. And the other two things, you know, even if you had a basic idea of how they functioned, it still doesn't quite make sense that you would pinpoint these three things. And if you look at the chat, you can see I didn't make a bunch of guesses and do a process of elimination. I just knew right away what I was looking for. And there's a bunch of examples of that. Like there's a imbalance in like the mass in the universe, and I had I mean, that's like not really a good way to put it, but I was thinking about this, and I just intuited that the connection had something to do with, or the solution had to do with neutrinos and dark matter. And sure enough, there's this connection that is exactly, you know. So what I'm saying is that when you have inculcated this kind of thinking, this kind of stuff definitely does happen. And I wouldn't talk about it if I didn't have proof. You know, I'm definitely making videos. I've already made some, but the more I work on developing this idea, and the pieces that I need are just kind of dropped into my mind, you know. Another good example, at one time I was thinking about how nothing is faster than light. And this voice in my head is like, consciousness is faster than light. And just the other day, I saw a YouTube video by some interview with some major physicist, and the title was "Consciousness is Faster Than Light." And at the time, I didn't understand. I knew it was right, but I didn't know what it meant. It turns out what it means is that consciousness is entangled. And so it's omnipresent, omniscient. I don't know about omnipotent yet, but he's not kidding, you know. And it's driven me nuts, like thinking it must just be luck, it must be a coincidence, you know, or I'm just wrong or something. And then, you know, I investigate, and it turns out to be correct. And sometimes these things anticipate science by 10 years or something, you know. There's a lot to unpack there, and I'm almost like dazed to just trying to think about it. And also finding a lot of the stuff that we've encountered tonight, you know, the Lucifer theory that I had, and to find that's an old Hermetic that the electromagnetic wave, basically, this ether, that they actually called it Lucifer and thought of it in that way. It's wild for me to see this stuff. Yeah. It is by means of this light that static visionaries place themselves in communication with all worlds, as so frequently occurred to Swedenborg. Who is this Swedenborg? I gotta look this guy up. Who, notwithstanding, was imperfectly lucid. I know that feeling. Seeing that he did not distinguish reflections from rays, and often intermingled chimerical fancies with his most admirable dreams. We call those wish demons in more modern times, and that is one of the hardest things about being a true initiate. You know, you will receive, and I mean, so there's so many things I could say about this in terms of things that I've done that require, or experienced situations I put myself in that require what we call parapsychological capacities. The problem is that once you have done that successfully to a degree that you cannot deny it was real, your ego kicks in. You know, you're in danger of that. You're in danger of delusion. You're in danger of believing that every wish that you have is a precognition, that any voice in your head is, a spirit telling you the truth. People go mad down the rabbit hole all the time. And this is one of the reasons I always say that it's not really in the cards for every person to be a shaman. You know, it's not in the cards for every person to be a magician. Maybe at some point in human evolution that will be the case, but I don't think we're at that point yet. And that's one of the problems with, I promote this stuff, and I know that it has great efficacy for curing a lot of human ills. At the same time, the secrecy wasn't just about consolidating power and, keeping it amongst initiates. It's also to protect people from themselves, and making this stuff, trendy and even something that you can do for a living is really, really sketchy, really, really sketchy. And I recently did a stream where I talked about how it is causing a lot of problems. I went to PSOC today, and you see plant medicine casualties all over the place. And I can't honestly say they would have been worse off without it, but are they able to navigate it and use it in the way that a shaman would? Hell no. And it's a roll of the dice whether it actually helped them or not, so again, you guys, when I talk about studying psychology and critical thinking, developing critical thinking and doing logic puzzles for fun and stuff, arithmetic, that's how you ground yourself. That's how you ground yourself. And you cannot go any further into the state of adepthood safely than you have created these anchors and counterbalances. As you expand your mind, you must anchor your feet. Head above the heavens, feet below the hills. We say dreams because dream is the consequence of a natural and periodical ecstasy, which we term sleep. To be in ecstasy is to sleep. Magnetic somnambulism is a production and direction of sleep. The errors which occur therein are occasioned by reflections from the diaphany of waking persons, and above all of the magnetizer. Dream is vision produced by the refraction of a ray of truth. Damn. It's crazy how they knew a long time ago that consciousness was magnetic. Dream is a vision produced by the refraction of a ray of truth. The chimerical fantasy is hallucination occasioned by a reflection. The temptation of St. Anthony, refraction versus reflection. The temptation of St. Anthony with its nightmares and its monsters represents the confusion of reflections with direct rays. So long as the soul struggles, it is reasonable. When it yields to this species of invading intoxication, it becomes mad. To disentangle the direct ray and separate it from the reflections, such is the work of the initiate. Here, let us state distinctly that this work is through all times accomplished in the world by some of the flower of mankind, that there is hence a permanent revelation by intuition, and that there is no insuperable barrier which separates souls, because there are no sudden interruptions, and no abrupt walls in nature by which minds can be divided from one another. All is transition and blending, and assuming the perfectibility, if not infinite, at least indefinite, of human faculties, it will be seen that every person can attain to see all, and therefore to know all. Well, apparently he thinks everyone can be a shaman or a magician. There is no void in nature, all is peopled. There is no true death in nature, all is alive. Seest thou that star? Asked Napoleon of Cardinal Fesch. No, sire, I see it, said the emperor, and he most certainly did. When great men are accused of having been superstitious, it is because they beheld what remains unseen by the crowd. Men of genius differ from simple seers by their faculty of sensibly communicating to other men what they themselves perceive, and of making themselves believed by the force of enthusiasm and sympathy. Such persons are the medium of the divine word. Kind of language makes me a bit uncomfortable. Let us now state the manner in which visions operate. All forms correspond to ideas, and there is no idea which has not its proper and peculiar form. The primordial light, which is the vehicle of all ideas, is the mother of all forms, and transmits them from emanation to emanation, merely diminished or modified according to the density of the media. Secondary forms are reflections which return to the font of the emanated light. The forms of objects, being a modification of light, remain in the light where the reflection consigns them. Hence the astral light or terrestrial fluid, which we call the great magnetic agent, is saturated with all kinds of images or reflections. Now our soul can evoke these and refer them to its diaphany, as the Kabbalists call it. Such images are always present to us and are always effaced by the more powerful impressions of reality during waking hours, or by a preoccupation of the mind, which makes our imagination inattentive to the fluidic paranormal of the astrolight. We're working on something like this in the Patreon, in our chats. I think I know where this is going, and that's wild too. Anybody that was present for the last conversation, the one before last that we had, that hears this is going to freak out. I won't talk about it yet, though. Oh, yeah, by the way, join the Patreon. We need support in order to take over the world, which is basically what our agenda is. Whether directly or indirectly, through subtlety or force. Seriously, we need to blow up our numbers and have a real presence on the world stage. None of us are famous enough to say all this shit, on a major mainstream platform. That needs to happen, So if it's not me that you support, find somebody else like me and support them. Or if you are someone that is in a position to do that, try to convince people to support you. But we need unity, and we need, unfortunately, some of the conditions in this world are dictated to us and not by us. And one of those is that we have to have money in order to have any kind of impact and influence. People try to argue about that, and show me. You can't show me, because it doesn't happen. That is the way up, through, around, or over. You have to pay for it, or you're not going anywhere. And also, I need surgeries, so if you don't want us to not continue to make content, then supporting us is very helpful. Very, very helpful. You can at least please hit the like button, share, subscribe, and make sure you turn on your bell notifications so that you don't miss anything. When we sleep, this spectacle presents itself spontaneously before us, and in this way dreams are produced. Dreams vague and incoherent if some governing will do not remain active during the sleep, giving even unconsciously to our intelligence a direction to dream, and which then transforms into vision. Animal magnetism is nothing else but an artificial sleep produced by the voluntary or enforced union of two wills, one of which is awake while the other slumbers, that is, one of which directs the other in the choice of reflections for the transformation of dreams into visions, and the attainment of truth by means of images. Thus, somnambulists do not actually travel to the place where they are sent by the magnetizer. They evoke its images in the astral light and can behold nothing which does not exist in that light. The astral light has a direct action on the nerves, which are its conductors in the animal economy, transmitting it to the brain, whence also in the state of somnambulism, it is possible to see by means of the nerves without being dependent on radiant light, the astral fluid being a latent light, in the same way that physics recognizes the existence of a latent caloric. I can explain that a little bit more succinctly, I think. So everything is entangled, right? Your consciousness is entangled with everything. It's really everything's really all in one place, anyways. Yeah, you know, the holographic thing. The all is in the all. But basically, what he's saying is, if you think about how physicists say that no information is lost at the quantum level, right? Like if you burn a book, every single word that was written in it still exists in the 0 point field. And so when you're dreaming, the interactions that you can have with a place are something along those lines, that you are able to interface with things on that level. And so the other day, I woke up after having a dream that I shot an iguana, and the first thing I heard was a video of cops raiding a house in Florida, and they're like, "Are there any dangerous iguanas in here that are going to attack us?" And you know, what the hell? Like, really? I wake up from a dream where I just shot an iguana and get attacked by an iguana, and then I wake up to cops like worrying about getting attacked by iguanas. It does not make any sense, but it happened. And so it occurred to me that because everything is reinforced or amplified right now because of the solar storms, which will continue to increase until July, and that's why we're having our final retreat event well, it's either June or July. We have to narrow it down, but it's going to be end of June, early July, either way. Anyways, this provoked me to think about that perhaps we could start to plant things in our dreams, and they have to be things that are, you know, possible, but improbable. And then after a few weeks of practicing this, we would all choose something collectively and focus this and put this in our dreams and see if we could make a bigger impact than the little thing that we were able to apparently exert our will. And these things happen more from the subconscious, right? The matter-subconscious connection is, all of this that I'm talking about is basically the mechanisms behind synchronicity as well. So the ability to do this, I think, is probably strongest during dreams. And that's what he's saying too. So anyways, that's what we do in our Patreon group, things like that, organizing stuff like that. Magnetism between two persons is certainly a wonderful discovery, but the magnetizing of a person by himself, accomplishing his own lucidity and directing himself at will, is the perfection of magical art. And think about this. In a lucid dream, if you really master it, fully awake but you don't wake up, that is how you can exert your will, and it becomes your universe. You can control everything. It's more limited in real life, but I can tell you from personal experience, and lots of it, that if you wake up in real life, something like that happens. It's, you know, not omnipotence for sure, and it fluctuates, and you know, but that's what's up. The secret of this great work does not rest for discovery. It has been known and practiced by a great number of initiates, above all by the celebrated Apollonius of Tyana, who has left a theory concerning it, as we shall see in the ritual. The secret of magnetic lucidity and the direction of the phenomena of magnetism depend on two things: the agreement of minds and the complete union of wills, in a direction which is possible and determined by science. This is for the operation of magnetism between two or more persons. Listen to this. Solitary magnetism requires preparations of which we have spoken in our initial chapter, when enumerating and establishing in all their difficulty the essential qualities of a veritable adept. In the following chapters, we shall further elucidate this important and fundamental point. The empire of the will over the astral light, which is the physical soul of the four elements, is represented in magic by the pentagram, which we have set at the head of this chapter. The elementary spirits are subservient to this sign when employed with understanding, and by placing it in the circle or on the table of evocations, they can be rendered tractable, which is magically called to imprison them. Let us briefly explain this marvel. All created beings communicate with one another by signs, and all adhere to a certain number of truth expressed by determinate forms. The perfection of forms increases in proportion to the detachment of spirits, and those that are not overweighted by the chains of matter recognize by intuition out of hand whether a sign is the expression of a real power or of a precipitate will. The intelligence of the wise man therefore gives value to his pantacle, as science gives weight to his will, and spirits comprehend this power immediately. Thus, by means of the pentagram, spirits can be forced to appear in vision, whether in the waking or sleeping state, by themselves leading before our diaphany their reflection, which exists in the astral light, if they have lived. What happened to my cursor? Okay. If they have lived, or a reflection analogous to their spiritual logos if they have not lived on earth. This explains all visions and accounts for the dead invariably appearing to seers, either such as they were upon earth or such as they were in the grave, never as they subsist in a condition which escapes the perceptions of an actual organism. The shells of the dead. Pregnant women are influenced more than others by the astral light, which occurs in the formation of the child and perpetually offers them reminiscence of the forms which abound therein. That is true too, and they just photographed it for the first time recently. That at the moment of conception, there is a flash of light. No way he could have seen that. This explains how it is that women of the highest virtue deceive the malignity of observers by equivocal resemblances. On the fruit of their marriage, they impress frequently an image which has struck them in dream, and it is thus that the same physiognomies are perpetuated from generation to generation. My partner gets mad at me for things that happen in dreams all the time because their relationship to that astral light makes it real in a sense that it's not as real for us. The Kabbalistic usage of the pentagram can therefore determine the appearance of unborn children. And an initiated woman might endow her son with the characteristics of Nero or Achilles as much as with those of Louis XIV or Napoleon. We shall indicate the method in our ritual. The pentagram is called in Kabbalah the sign of the microcosm, that sign so exalted by Goethe in the beautiful monologue of Faust. Ah, how do all my senses leap at this sight? I feel the young and sacred pleasure of life bubbling in my nerves and veins. Was it a god who traced this sign which stills the vertigo of my soul, fills my poor heart with joy, and in a mysterious rapture unveils the forces of nature around me? Am I myself a god? All is so clear to me. I behold in these simple lines the revelation of active nature of my soul. I realize for the first time the truth of the wise man's words. The words of spirits is not closed. Thy sense is obtuse, thy heart is dead. Arise, bathe, O adept of science, thy breast still enveloped by an earthly veil in the splendors of the dawning day. On the 24th of July in the year 1854, the author of this book, Eliphas Levi, made experiments of evocation with the pentagram. We should check the astrological giggities for that day and see when they happen again. Dude knew what he was doing. The pentagram, after due preparation by all the ceremonies which are indicated in the 13th chapter of the ritual. The success of this experiment, details of which, as regards to its principles, will be found in the corresponding chapter of this, our doctrinal part, establishes a new pathological fact, which men of true science will admit without difficulty. The repeated experience, and all three times, gave results truly extraordinary, but positive and unmixed with hallucination. We invite skeptics to make a conscientious and intelligent attempt before shrugging their shoulders. Wait a minute. Okay, so it just happened again, right? I said, we should do this, and he's like, and by the way, you guys should try to do this. Oh my gosh. It took me a second to realize that was actually happening. The figure of the pentagram, perfected in accordance with science and used by the author in his experiment, is that which is found at the head of this chapter, and it is more perfect than any in the Keys of Solomon or in the magical calendars of Tycho, Brahe, and Duchanteur. We must, however, remark, Duchantau, maybe? I don't know. We must, however, remark that the use of the pentagram is most dangerous for operators who are not in possession of its complete and perfect understanding. The direction of the points of the star is in no sense arbitrary and may change the entire character of the operation, as we shall explain in the ritual. Paracelsus, the innovator in magic, who surpassed all other initiates in his unaided practical success, affirms that every magical figure and every Kabbalistic sign of the pentacles which compel spirits may be reduced to two, which are the synthesis of all others, and these are the sign of the macrocosm, or the seal of Solomon, the form of which we have already given and now reproduce here, and that of the microcosm, more potent even than the first, that is to say, the pentagram, of which he provides a most minute description in his occult philosophy. If it be asked how a sign can exercise so much power over spirits, we inquire in return why the whole Christian world bows down before the sign of the cross. The sign is nothing by itself and has no force apart from the doctrine of which it is the summary and the logos. Now, a sign which sums, by their expression, all the occult forces of nature, a sign which has ever exhibited to elementary spirits and others a power greater than their own, naturally fills them with respect and fear and enforces their obedience by the empire of science and of will over ignorance and weakness. By the pentagram also is measured the exact proportions of the great and unique athanor necessary to the confection of the philosophical stone and the accomplishment of the great work. The most perfect alembic, in which the quintessence can be elaborated, is conformable to this figure, and the quintessence itself is represented by the sign of the pentagram. Damn, y'all, this is just gangster. Supreme intelligence is necessarily reasonable. And that's what's up. Here, let me check in with the chat. Man, it's crazy that we don't have a bigger audience for this, because this is crazy. People need to hear this shit. Do you ever experience sleep paralysis? Oh, hell yeah, I have, man. I used to be totally convinced it was a demon swinging me around the room, because it just, it felt like something grabbed me by the legs. So would that mean women shamans are more common? No, they're not. And they never were. Except, well, we'll get into that. There are phases, and I think that, reflections, right? We were talking about reflections versus refractions. Men dominating during certain periods is a refraction of truth. It's not necessarily about, how do they say it? I don't know. Let's call it male toxic masculinity or whatever, right? It's not about that. There was a period of matriarchy that preceded it, and these are phases of humanity's development. Oh, I forgot. I have my screen sharing on. I should put this back. So there are not very many male shamans traditionally, and just cultures have different, there are variations, but overall around the world, no. Not during this period, but I'm willing to bet during the matriarchal period there was almost nothing but women shamans. In fact, there are some cultures like the Hunikuan where there are groups of women that are sort of on a feminist trip, and they're demanding that they're allowed to be shamans, even though they're not by their tradition. We were supporting a few of those. And I'm not taking a position on this, by the way. I think we're actually merging the sexes. A lot of right-wingers are going to hate to hear that, but I think, what happens is the one becomes the multitude, right? One soul divided, that union may come. And then it comes back together, redintegrates is the word, actually. Returning something to a former state. So the original unity was nothingness, but once it became duality, it's really still one being, is what I'm saying. It's an androgynous thing. That's why the goat of Mindy's, Baphomet, is androgynous, right? So the destiny of mankind is to be unisex, almost without question. And this upsurge in gender fluidity and whatnot, it is being used by the overlords to piss people off. But it's not unnatural either. And Aleister Crowley predicted that this would happen in 1904 and even gave a timeline. 100 years from now, people will be becoming extremely bisexual and epicene, which means gender fluid or non-binary. You know what I mean? That's the one becomes, it splits and it reconvenes. That's what's going on. You know, that's what everything does. So, women were always witches and whatnot during this period. And these girls, these Hunikuin, that are rebelling against the male status quo, the women in the tribe have always known the practices of shamanism, but they were not allowed to be the village shaman. So, I guess it depends on what you meant by that. In terms of tradition, are women shamans more often? I think a lot of women have a lot of these capacities without even really realizing it. The intuition of women they talk about. And I think a lot of these things are also getting ruined by culture and chemicals. And, I see less and less evidence of women legitimately being tuned into these things and being more like new agey flakes that think they're tuned into these things and aren't. That just seems to be the norm, unfortunately. But I guess it's a complicated answer. It is true that they're naturally predisposed to intuition, and they are trying to attract. When Crowley said that woman has no soul, he did not mean it's a bad taste joke, right? But that's not what he was talking about. They say female stars pull inwards and male stars project, so black holes versus stars of light, right? So the women have this magnetic pull, and part of that magnetic pull is pulling electromagnetic field resonances that contain information and patterns. And most of the time that goes directly into the subconscious, but every now and then it emerges in the conscious mind. And this happens to everyone, but to different people sometimes more often. And these kind of practices and this kind of knowledge really dig it out. I don't even know if I'm going to keep going with this tonight because I almost feel like I should have done all of these separately and taken more time with each one, but I'm going to repost them as videos with like visuals because people need to hear this guy. It's really helping me out a lot, because I really struggled tremendously with doubt and imposter syndrome, where you think you're an imposter but you're not on some level, with both as a musician but particularly as a magician. But partly because it's so weird, you don't actually expect reality to bend to the degree that it has in my world, not even once, much less a lot, So looking back, I'm pretty disappointed that I had so much resistance and so much doubt, because now I'm realizing, man, if I had just accepted it and embraced it, and like, yeah, it's frustrating. It really is. I'm trying to just be grateful that now I'm realizing what it is and what it can do, and that this thing that I've been expecting my entire life is happening, and we're in that moment. Instead of dwelling on the past. And anyways, the past is kind of irrelevant when you realize that you're really eternal. That the chances that you're not are pretty slim. In fact, I used to say that I had problems with reincarnation because, how does the soul find like an egg at just the right moment, like, that's right at the moment of conception, or how does it just seems a bit ridiculous. But then if you think about the holographic nature of reality, which is now supported by the way that information is dispersed around the event horizon of black holes, that problem's kind of solved too. There isn't anywhere to go. There's this old Grateful Dead song. He says, when I was just a little young boy, Daddy said, son, you know you'll never get far. Tell you the reason if you want to know. Child of mine, there isn't really very far to go. Nowhere, in other words. Let me check in with the chat again and see if there's any more questions or suggestions. Maybe we'll just talk a little bit and we'll jump back into the book. Man, all of you guys are just tuning in. You don't even know what you missed, man. It was it was wild. We're not done though. Maybe in terms of tradition, it went from both to female to male to female, seer, the mystic, and the witchy women, wizard, back and forth. Yeah, that's what happens basically. Yeah. Well, you can shoot me an email if you would like to have a chat. It goes from singularity, duality to potentiality. Well, it remains in duality, but I mean, at least until we transcend this realm. I'm a father of two. 2 weeks of retreat is good, yeah. We are having retreats in the jungle in Peru, in Manu in May, and we are having one in April, but just for like 1 or 2 people at a time. And then we're having the big climax event during the peak of the solar storms at the highest possible point in the Andes, probably at an old Incan ruin. Okay, we're getting more people showing up. I wanted to play guitar because I have a music stream coming up, but we'll do one more chapter. Because, you guys took the trouble to click, so we should bust out. But, oh, man, plus I'm just a little bit stunned. I haven't stopped and said things about everything that I've encountered that's, like, kind of shook me up a little bit here. But, yeah, it's getting deep. Okay, 6D, tell me about it. Magical equilibrium. Tiferet Uncas. Supreme intelligence is necessarily reasonable. God in philosophy may be only a hypothesis, but he is a hypothesis imposed by good sense on human reason. Oh, man. To personify the absolute reason is to determine the divine ideal, necessity, liberty, and reason. These are the great and supreme triangle of the Kabbalists, who name reason Keter, necessity Chakma, and liberty Bina, in their first divine triad. Keter is the supreme divine light, which is reason. Now, in light of that light, which I had aforetime, I had that light aforetime. I'm always saying, this thing of abandoning logic and common sense and reasoning and critical thinking in order to navigate your metaphysics and your spiritual models, that's not it. Spirituality is literally reason. You know what I mean? That's its fundamental substance. It is symmetry. In their first divine triad, fatality, which is in this case fate, and not the other type, will and power, such as the magical triad, which corresponds in human things to the divine triad. Fatality is the inevitable sequence of effects and causes in a determined order. Will is the directing faculty of intelligent forces for the conciliation of the liberty of persons with the necessity of things. Damn, man, that is so well put. Will is the directing faculty of intelligent forces for the conciliation of the liberty of persons with the necessity of things. Wow. I mean, it's so simple, but it's like, that's the trinity of mastery. Power is the wise application of will, which enlists fatality itself in the accomplishment of the desires of the sage. That is a good one, too. Power is the wise application of will, which enlists fatality itself in the accomplishment of the desires of the sage. When Moses smote the rock, he did not when Moses smoked the rock. He did not create the spring of water. He revealed it to the people because occult science had made it known to himself by means of the divining rod. It is in like manner with all... There's a big fucking spider walking across the wall over there. Right towards my bed. Dude, no. I woke up with a swollen foot and like spider bites all over my toe and like a black and blue toe, and it was like a month ago and it's still swollen. Probably it was that guy. Where was I? It is in like manner with all miracles of magic. A law exists which is ignored by the vulgar and made use of by the initiate. Occult laws are often diametrically opposed to common ideas. Tell me about it. For example, the crowd believes in the sympathy of things which are alike and in the hostility of things contrary, but it is the opposite which is the true law, and that is facts, y'all. It used to be affirmed that nature detests the void, but it should be said that nature desires it, were the void not, in physics, the most irrational of fictions. Everything is made of nothing. Nature doesn't detest a void. It uses it to build its entire reality. What are these people talking about, the vulgar? What are they talking about? They even know. They look right at it, and they still say the opposite about so many things. If you tell them that all of these things are true and false, and it's both true and false to say that they are true and false, they will say, oh, mystical gibberish, man. Wait, you idiot, trying to sound deep, whatever. And it's like, okay, so it is and it's not. It's just mystical gibberish. Okay. So you're telling me time goes in every direction at once and also linear? So it is and it's not linear, and then matter is empty space. So it is and it's not. So where does this break down? Where does this concept of it is and it's not break down? No, nowhere. I see. Okay. So why are you laughing at us? And geniuses, man, these fucking people. In all things, the vulgar mind habitually takes shadow for reality, turns its back upon light, and is reflected in the obscurity which it projects itself. The forces of nature are at the disposal of one who knows how to resist them. Are you master sufficiently of yourself to be never intoxicated? Then you will direct the terrible and fatal power of intoxication. If you would make others drunk, possess them with the desire of drink, but do not partake of it yourself. That man will dispose of the love of others who is master of his own. If you would possess, do not give. The world is magnetized by the light of the sun, and we are magnetized by the astral light of the world. I'm telling you guys, there is no better time for us to make change in this world and in your life than right now as these solar storms are intensifying. We have until July. When it hits that peak, you better be ready. It's the apocalypse. It really is. It's literally the apocalypse, which means revelation. That's what's happening. Return of the sun god. That's what's happening. When they talk about the return of Christ, this final sunstorm, that's the moment that is prophesied in the Bible. It's not what the Christians think it is, but that's what's happening right now. And if not, we're fucked. Period. End of story. And you all know it. That which operates in the body of the planet repeats itself in us. Within us, there are three analogical and hierarchic worlds, as in all nature. Man is the microcosm, or little world, and according to the doctrine of analogies, whatsoever is in the great world is reproduced in the small. Hence, we have three centers of fluidic attraction and projection: the brain, the heart, or epigastric region, and the genital organ. Each of these instruments is double. In other words, we find the suggestion of the triad therein. Each attracts on one side and repels on another. It is by means of these apparatuses that we place ourselves in communication with the universal fluid transmitted into us by the nervous system. These three centers are, moreover, the seat of the threefold magnetic operation, as we shall explain elsewhere. When the magus has attained lucidity, whether through the mediation of a Pythoness or by his own development, he communicates and directs at will the magnetic vibrations in the whole mass of the astral light. Oh, this brings me to something I should have talked about earlier. Well, let's finish this sentence. In the whole mass of the astral light, the currents of which he divines by means of the magic rod, which is a perfected divining rod. By the aid of these vibrations, he influences the nervous system of persons surrendered to his action, accelerates or suspends the currents of life, soothes or tortures, heals or hurts, in fine, slays or brings to life. Here, however, we pause in presence of with a smile of incredulity. Let us permit it to enjoy the cheap triumph of denying what it does not know. We shall demonstrate later on that death is always preceded by a lethargic sleep, and only takes place gradually, that resurrection is possible in certain cases, that lethargy is real but uncompleted death. Lethargy is real but uncompleted death. Next time you're feeling lazy, let that one hit you one time. And that the final paroxysm is in many cases subsequent to inhumation. This, however, is not the subject of the present chapter. The inhumation is just death, basically. This, however, is not the subject of the present chapter. We now affirm that a lucid will can act upon the mass of the astral light, and in concurrence with other wills, which it absorbs and draws along, can determine great and irresistible currents. This is why Crowley always had a scarlet woman. This is why sex magic is regarded as the most potent form of magic. Which I do not and have never practiced, because I am extremely prude, really, somehow. To be perfectly frank, probably ought to work on that. But yeah, because the man has the pattern, and the woman has the relationship with the magnetism, and so together they make a exponentially more powerful refraction of light. We also say that the astral light condenses or rarefies in proportion as currents accumulate, more or less, at certain centers, like here in the Sacred Valley. When it is deficient in the energy required, to the point where the electromagnetic field here is like warped. When it is deficient in the energy required for the support of life, diseases accompanied by sudden decomposition follow, of the kind which baffle physicians. There is not other cause, by example, in the case of cholera morbus, cholera morbus, and the swarms of animalculae observed or supposed by some specialists may be the effect rather than the cause. I don't know how that's never occurred to me. I guess we just operate on the assumption that we have the answer because we're told. I don't think about that kind of thing much, I guess, but it doesn't seem right to me. Still, no, we know better, don't we? We know better. That's not how that works. Oh, he said supposed by some specialists may be the effect rather than the cause. He's not saying it's fact. Cholera should therefore be treated by insufflation. Did not the operator thereby run the chance of an exchange with the patient, which would be very formidable for himself? Every intelligent effort of will is a projection of human fluid or light, and here it is needful to distinguish the human from the astral light and animal from universal magnetism. In making use of the word fluid, we employ an accepted expression, and would make ourselves understood in this manner, but we are far from deciding that the latent light is a fluid. What this actually means is something more along the lines of how we associate water with emotion. It's a correlation of that type, an allegorical connection. Everything prompts us, on the contrary, to prefer the system of vibrations in the explanation of this phenomenal subject. However it may be, the light in question, being the instrument of life, cleaves naturally to all living centers, attaches itself to the nucleus of planets, even as to the heart of man, and by the heart we understand magically the great sympathetic, identifying itself with the individual life of the being which it animates, and it is by this quality of sympathetic assimilation that it distributes itself without confusion. Hence, it is terrestrial in its affinity with the sphere of the earth and human exclusivity in the affinity with men. It is for this reason that electricity, caloric, light, and magnetism, produced by ordinary physical means, not only do not originate, but rather tend to neutralize the effects of animal magnetism. This astral light, subordinated to a blind mechanism and proceeding from arbitrary automatic centers, is a dead light and works mathematically, following given impulsions or fatal laws. The human light is fatal only to the ignorant in chance experiments. In the seer, it is subjected to intelligence, submitted to imagination, and dependent upon will. This light, continually projected by the will, constitutes the personal atmospheres of Swedenborg. The body absorbs what environs it and radiates perpetually by projecting its influences and invisible molecules. It is the same with the spirit, so that this phenomena, by some mystics called respiration, has really the influence, both physical and moral, which is assigned to it. It is undoubtedly contagious to breathe the same air as diseased persons, and to be within the circle of attraction and expansion which surrounds the wicked. When the magnetic atmosphere of two persons is so equilibrated that the attractive faculty of one draws the expansive faculty of the other, a tendency is produced which is termed sympathy. Then imagination, calling up to it all the rays or reflections analogous to that which it experiences, makes a poem of the desires which captivate the will. And if the persons differ in sex, it occasions in them, or more commonly in the weaker of the two, a complete intoxication of the astral light, which is termed passion par excellence, or love. But it is categorically forbidden to the magus at least as an intoxication or passion. Woe to the Samson of the Kabbalah if he permit himself to be put asleep by Delilah. The Hercules of science, who exchanges his royal scepter for the distaff of Omphale. Now I know where he got that. You fucker. Will soon experience the vengeance of Dejanira? Dejanira? I don't know what that is. And nothing will be left for him but the pyre of Mount Seta, in order to escape the devouring folds of the coat of Nessus. Sexual love is ever an illusion, for it is the result of an imaginary mirage. The astral light is the universal seducer, typified by the serpent of Genesis. This subtle agent, ever active, ever abounding in sap, ever fruitful in alluring dreams and sensuous images, this force, which by itself is blind and subordinated to every will, whether for good or evil, this ever-renewing circulus of unbridled life, which produces vertigo in the imprudent, this corporal spirit, this fiery body, this impalpable, omnipresent ether, this monstrous seduction of nature, how shall we define it comprehensively, and how characterize its action? Now, this is wild. If you guys watch my something about the Garden of Eden, the truth about the serpent in the Garden of Eden, my interpretation of the allegory was that the tree of life, or the tree of knowledge of good and evil, was consciousness itself. And that's what was being demonized in the story. And so was the serpent. It represented the wave of oscillating light. And that it actually told the truth. And that the demiurgos was, basically threatening them with death that they should remain in ignorance. So I just noticed this astral light is the universal seducer typified by the serpent of Genesis. Sounds like that intuition of mine may have been in good faith. To some extent, indifferent in itself, it lends itself to good as to evil. It transmits light and propagates darkness. It may be called equally Lucifer and Lucifuge. Who is this dude? It is a serpent, but it is also an aureole. Isn't that, what does that mean? It's like a nipple, the thing around your nipple, isn't it? It is a fire, but it may belong equally to the torments of Infernus. But it may belong equally to the torments of Infernus or to the sacrifice of incense offered up to heaven. To dispose of it, we must, like the predestined women, set our foot upon its head. In the elementary world, water corresponds to the Kabbalistic woman and fire to the serpent. To subdue the serpent, that is, to govern the circle of the astral light, we must place ourselves outside of its currents. That is, we must isolate ourselves. For this reason, Apollonius of Tyana wrapped himself completely in a mantle of fine wool, setting his feet thereon and drawing it over his head. Then he bent his back in semicircular fashion and closed his eyes after fulfilling certain rites, probably magnetic passes and sacramental words designed to fix the imagination and determine the action of the will. The woolen mantle is of great use in magic, and was the common conveyance of sorcerers on their way to the Sabbath, which proves that the sorcerers did not really go to the Sabbath, but the Sabbath came to them. When isolated in their mantle, and conducted to their translucid images analogous to their magical preoccupations, combined with reflections of all kindred acts previously accomplished in the world. This torrent of universe... Okay, wait. He just flew right over that. So, how did he put it? Combined with reflections of all kindred acts previously accomplished in the world. So, in order to accumulate power to achieve some goal, right, you align yourself with the... it's kind of like genetics, right? When you have the endpoint of evolution, that, you know, the current manifestation of some organism, you know, it is basically the result of all of that as a force, that the development and those ancestors. And so the pentagram, for example, one of the reasons it's considered to be such a powerful symbol is that people have used them in ritual, which imbues the symbol itself with the power of all those people that have interacted with it, right? And there's even evidence now in physics that this sort of thing could be real, you know, entanglement, and also if all information is retained in the at the level of the quantum, you know. So there's that, but it also applies to acts, right? That you are able to sort of align yourself with moments in history when things that are similar to your objective have been accomplished. You know what I mean? We'll get deeper into that and I'll explain it better, but I just wanted to kind of touch on it because we just passed by a reference to it. This torment of universal life is also represented in religious doctrines by the expiatory fire of Higgity Hill. It is the instrument of initiation, the monster to be overcome, the enemy to subdue. It is this which brings us to our evocations and to the conjurations of goetic magic, such swarms of larvae and phantoms. Therein are preserved all the forms which by their fantastic and fortuitous assemblage people are nightmares with such abominable deformities. To allow ourselves to be sucked down by this whirling stream is to fall into the abysses of madness, more frightful than those of death, to expel the darkness of this chaos and force it to give perfect forms to our thoughts. This is to be a man of genius. It is to create. It is to be victorious over hell. The astral light directs the instincts of animals and offers battle to the intelligence of man, which it strives to pervert by the enticements of its reflections and the illusion of its images, a fatal and inevitable operation, directed and made still more calamitous by the elementary spirits and suffering souls whose restless wills seek out sympathies in our weakness, and tempt us not so much to destroy us as to win friends for themselves. That makes sense. Because I have never once encountered entity, an ayahuasca spirit, any of these things. No demon during ritual magic working, nothing that's ever told me to do anything bad or dumb, even. or even lied. All the information I've gotten from DMT entities and ayahuasca spirits, even if it's extremely specific with timelines, in 5 minutes, this specific person is going to send you this amount of money. As the DMT vision's closing, the vision disappears, my phone beeps. It's that person, that amount of money. I didn't ask her for money. She'd never done it before. I had sent no distress signals saying the family was in trouble, nothing at all, no reason for it at all whatsoever. Amount of money, person, and that it just happened. So, point being, and I've always thought, if you're a spirit on the realm of pure energy, and I'm not talking about a ghost, you don't have death, you don't have a leg to break, you don't have a grape to commit. You know what I mean? What is your motivation? Evil is motivated by something. The Christian and Islamic, this kind of religious belief that evil exists just for the sake of evil is not real. That is one of the fairy tale religion things that they use to make idiots of people, basically. And it works. That fairy tale comic book kind of shit. It's also the same mentality that provokes people to believe in like U.S. presidents and stuff. Good versus evil kind of battle. It's not real. It's not how the universe actually works. But what motivation would they have to, kill us? And also, I've thought, if there are invisible evil entities everywhere, we have no way to know they're there unless you're a magician and you're looking for them. But most people would have no defenses. We would be gone. The whole human race would have been gone a long time ago. It just doesn't make any sense. But that idea of like toxic, like residues, the clip out of people that are just want the sympathy of your weakness, that shit jives. That jives. This faculty, which belongs to divination. Wait, did I skip something? Yeah. That book of consciences, which according to Christian doctrine shall be opened at the last day, is no other than the astral light, which preserves the impress of every logos, that is to say, all of our actions of all forms. See, they knew the shit that physicists are just now discovering. They knew that it was magnetic fields. They knew what it, you know what I mean? There's no, how do they say there's no proof of any of this shit? This is proof. It absolutely is proof. Absolutely is proof. Our acts modify our magnetic respiration in such a way that a seer meeting any person for the first time can tell whether that person is innocent or criminal. And what are his virtues or his crimes. This faculty, which belongs to divination, was called by the Christian mystics of the early church the discernment of spirits. I have that. Absolutely. Anyone that knows me will tell you that. And go contact any of my clients. They will all tell you that. And yeah, I was an outlaw since I was a child, and you have to develop that kind of, sixth sense almost to stay alive. But it's more than that. And a lot of it comes from ayahuasca, and I think I know what happens. It's just a matter of, our filtration system and our nervous system is constantly filtering things, And when you have taken it down, or mine, I think, was broken when I was born or something, and so you just, I have a feedback loop with people's intuition. As soon as I meet someone, I just empty pretty much the contents of their being directly into my mind. And it doesn't mean that I know all the details of their life, but I do know whether they were molested, whether their parents, one or both of their parents, was a narcissist. All of this stuff. And that's why, as a life coach, I hate to use that word, or an unlicensed therapist, I have a PhD psychologist that was a client, and that people that have been in therapy and have had psychologists and psychotherapists and intensively their whole life and got nowhere, and I was able to help, and that's why, because I just and it's not like a divine superpower. It's just a magnetic exchange, and you just have to metaprogram to be able to receive it. It's that simple. It's crazy when people try to lie to me too. That's happened a couple times recently, and I'm like, did you really just do that? It's not gonna work. attempt to destroy us. The book of consciences, which according to Christian doctrine shall be opened on the last day, is no other than the astral light which preserves the impress of every logos, that is to say, of all actions and all forms. Our acts modify our magnetic respiration in such a way that a seer meeting any person for the first time can tell whether that person is innocent or criminal and what are his virtues or his crimes. This faculty, which belongs to divination, was called by the Christian mystics of the early church the discernment of spirits. Those who abdicate the empire of reason and delight to let their wills wander in pursuit of the reflections in the astral light are subject to alternations of mania and melancholy, which have originated all the marvels of demoniacal possession, though it is true at the same time that by means of these reflections impure spirits can act upon similar souls, make use of them as docile instruments, and even habitually torment their organism, wherein they enter and reside by obsession or embryonically. These Kabbalistic terms are explained in the Hebrew book of the Revolution of Souls, of which our 13th chapter will contain a succinct analysis. It is therefore extremely dangerous to make sport of the mysteries of magic. It is above all excessively rash to practice its rites from curiosity, by experiment, and as if to exploit higher forces. The inquisitive who, without being adepts, busy themselves with evocations or occult magnetism are like children playing with fire in the neighborhood of a cask of gunpowder. Sooner or later, they will fall victims to some terrible explosion. And that happened to me. And the thing is, I wasn't playing with magic. Magic was playing with me. I didn't start with the magic. The magic I kind of fell into as a way to get control of it. But it was just already happening. And I luckily was willing to follow this intuitive process because I was so skeptical, enough to pull myself out of it before, anything. Well, was it disastrous? In some ways, for sure. But let's just to paraphrase and simplify this: too much enthusiasm, untempered by wisdom, and you are figgity fucked if you have made any progress in developing this relationship with the astral light. To be isolated from the astral light is not enough to envelop oneself in a woolen fabric. We must also, and above all, impose absolute tranquility on mind and heart. We must be a hollow tube so we can bring down fire from heaven with no interference patterns. We must have quitted the world of passions and be assured of perseverance in the spontaneous operations of an inflexible will. We must frequently reiterate the acts of this will, for, as we shall see in the introduction to the ritual, the will only assures itself by acts, as the power and perpetuity of religions depend on their rites and ceremonies. There are intoxicating substances which, by increasing nervous sensibility, exalt the power and, consequently, the allurements of astral representations. By the same means, but pursuing a contrary course, spirits may be alarmed and disturbed. These substances, of themselves magnetic and further magnetized by the operators, are what people term filters and enchanted potions. But we shall not enter here upon this dangerous application of magic, which Cornelius Agricola himself terms venomous magic. He seems to have a lot of respect for Agrippa. I should look up some of his stuff too. I've never read any of it. It is true that there are no longer pyres for sorcerers, but always, and more than ever, are there penalties dealt out to malefactors. Let us confine ourselves, therefore, to stating as the occasion offers the reality of this power. To direct the astral light, we must understand also its double vibration, as well as the balance of forces termed magical equilibrium and expressed in the Kabbalah by the synary. Considered in its first cause, this equilibrium is the will of God. It is liberty in man and mathematical equilibrium in nature. Equilibrium produces stability and duration. Liberty generates the immortality of man, and the will of God gives effects to the laws of eternal reason. Equilibrium in ideas is reason and enforces power. Equilibrium is exact. Fulfill its law, and it is there. Violate it, however slightly, and it is destroyed. For this reason, nothing is useless or lost. Every utterance and every movement are for or against truth, which is composed of for and against conciliated, or at least equilibrated. We shall state in the introduction of the ritual how magical equilibrium should be produced and why it is necessary to the success of all operations. Omnipotence is the most absolute liberty. Now, absolute liberty cannot exist apart from perfect equilibrium. This right here is going to be the solution to our current chaostrophe politically and culturally. Magical equilibrium is hence one of the first conditions of success in the operations of science, and must be sought even in occult chemistry. Magical equilibrium, in part, would be having a very clear and uncluttered concept of what it is you're trying to accomplish and why you're trying to accomplish it. And must be sought even in occult chemistry by learning to combine contraries without neutralizing them by one another. Magical equilibrium explains the great and primeval mystery of the existence and relative necessity of evil. This relative necessity gives in black magic the measure of the power of demons or impure spirits to whom virtues practiced upon earth are a source of increased rage and apparently of increased power. At the epochs when saints and angels work miracles openly, sorcerers and fiends in their turn operate marvels and prodigies. Rivalry often creates success. We lean upon that which resists. Damn, this is gangster, y'all. Let me check in with the chat. What I was saying about what was it? Hold on, let me look. Let me look back real quick and see what's really hood. Oh yeah. The paradox of next time we finna start on 7, the fiery sword. And I would make these longer, honestly, and I'll talk to you guys for a bit if people are into that. But I want to be able to download them and edit them. And if I make them too large, I won't be able to do that. So that's why we're only doing a couple hours at a time. Let me just fix this up so that I'm cuter. By the way, please do hit the like button, share, subscribe, consider supporting the channel because we are demonetized and we are in a bit of a pickle at the moment due to my ass getting old and falling apart to an extent. If I can just hang in there, though, you guys, you know what? Cell reversal, age, you know what I mean? We're on the verge of immortality. It's like earlier when I was talking about the past, and I was like, yeah, but you know what? It doesn't really matter that much. If you are able to pull it together right now, there's a good chance that you're not going to have to die. My son's generation probably won't have to die. It'll be an option, at least for people that are in a certain type of position. And there's a lot of fear in the world right now that is totally unwarranted. The law of necessity, right? Like, the universe is not going to just kill off all the good people and let the evil reign. I think a lot of stupid people are scared because they know that stupidity is almost as bad as evil, or worse, actually, because we can hunt evil down and kill it. But stupidity, we can't really do anything about it. You can't fix it. You can't reform a stupid person, And so I think a lot of people that are not willing to adapt and evolve know that they're kind of slated for termination. And, that's why they're pointing the finger so much and calling everyone evil and whatnot. But that's the reality. What's happening in the world right now with AI making people obsolete and medical technology getting to the point where a lot of people are going to live forever, there's no way that we can just have this whole population and then also have it breeding and then have it go forever. You know what I mean? So this thing that's prophesied in the Bible is kind of true. This 1,000 years of peace, it implies utopia and mechanizing everything and automating stuff. And I'm not saying it's right, to hurt anyone. I'm not promoting that or condoning it. I'm talking about nature and the universal mind here, and it's not got anything to do with whether I like it or not. This is what's happening. So, out of necessity, it's going to be trimmed down to the most intelligent and the most adaptable and the most creative, and you know what I mean? And right now, it looks like they're just persecuting evil, but You don't see them, people that are not accepting certain mandates. If those are Depop agendas, why are they getting rid of the Muggles? Not enough people are asking themselves this. Things are not what they seem. you know, um, I'm not going to say much more about that. I probably said too much already. Sometimes I forget I'm not just necessarily in my living room with my friends or whatever. But at the same time, if you can't handle the truth, then you shouldn't be here. So, if I offended you, I'm not sorry. Not at all. If I upset you, I'm not sorry either. This is my job to tell the truth, and it's crazy right now to try to understand this, but it is what it is. That's where we're going though, and it's really important to let this really sink in. What's happening on this planet right now? The law of necessity. It's not even the world leaders that are doing these things. Really, it's something bigger than that. It's an equation balancing. It's an organism managing. It'll manage the human race just like your body would manage red blood cells and white blood cells. So, we're kind of at a point too where you're not waking anybody up, like almost no one. He who is dirty, let him be dirty still, and he who is clean, let him be clean. That's where we're at. Nobody, I've noticed people have become so rigid. All that is to be done is for those who have heard the call and understand to do your best to navigate the incoming difficulties and terrain and elevate yourself as much as possible and accept that that's your fate or not. But, at least that's what I think is happening. And a lot of the other things that people see happening, I'm not saying that all these world leaders and stuff are even consciously aware of what I'm talking about. But in the case of people that are acting on the level of animal magnetism, it's mathematical. They're not really aware of much, People like Donald Trump and Joe Biden, they're almost like they're basically automatons, sort of like just on autopilot, serving a function. People think of NPCs as only being like the bagger at Walmart, but no, they're presidents and these things too. They're not. They're playing a role. It's functional and it's a product of the law of necessity. Not the battle between good and evil, the battle between equilibrium and disequilibrium, between order and disorder, between entropy and what is the opposite of entropy? I can't even remember right now. Entropy opposite. Negentropy. Of course. All right, let me check in with the chat, see how many of you soldiers survived my pro Depop my pro Depop rant. Hey, we have 11 concurrent viewers and 11 likes. And, well, not anymore, but hey, man, we had a good watch time tonight, 16, 17. 144,000. No, I think it's going to be more than that. I don't think that number really means anything. Do I know any songs by Buckethead? No. I was considering doing a music stream tonight, but I think I'm going to save it for Thursday. We'll do it Thursday. I need to get some new material together and get my EQ dialed in and whatnot. So if you guys have any questions or subjects that you would like to toss at me for a few minutes here, I understand what you said. I have the same ability. Your seer is what I call it. Believe it to be in your genes. I was always considered gifted. Yeah, it's a weird thing, man. It's a really strange thing, and it's taken me an entire lifetime to come to terms with. and I still haven't really completely. I did a bunch of IQ tests the other day, and I still I can't accept it. you know, um, it's just it's a strange thing. Like you were saying, being born like that. I too was taken out of normal school and put in gifted and talented and the whole thing. But it's like I didn't want anything to do with their world, so it didn't do it. It didn't help me. It didn't didn't help. And then when you start to experience all of these sort of preternatural or parapsychological phenomena, and you've been an outcast from society and your whole life, and it was really difficult to not. I don't know. Yeah, I'm kind of rambling, but just to accept that there was reality to it was way harder than it should have been. But here we are, and it's a magical moment. There's definitely lots of opposition, but that opposition is exactly what we need. That's the thing, we need that. We lean on what resists, that our success and the degree of it is in direct disproportion to our opposition. So I'm not worried about a motherfucking thing. I don't know about you guys. But I'm really not. Hearing your own voice giving future premonitions before it happens. Yeah, I don't know if it's my own voice or not. That's something. That's something I've wondered for a long time. Like when I was a little child, it would tell me things all the time. Like which drugs. When I was like 6 years old, it told me which drugs to do and which not. It was like psychedelics would be really helpful for you. Don't touch cocaine, but particularly pills. If you touch them, you're going to have a huge problem. I didn't even know what the hell it was talking about, and I did end up with a pill problem for a while. And psychedelics are a huge help. Luckily, if I used cocaine at all in the past, it was pretty moderate. So that I'm more or less stuck to. There were periods where I was definitely overboard with everything when I was really a lot younger. But even metaphysical stuff. Like I saw an ant in my backyard one time, and I was looking at it in the eyes, and that voice is like, "Yeah, see that ant? Before the end of time, you will have experienced an entire lifetime, lived an entire lifetime from the point of view of every ant, not just that is alive, but every ant that ever lived and ever will live, every person that ever lived, the stars, all of it, all of it. You will experience an entire lifetime from the point of view of everything that ever lived, everything that ever will live, and that is living." And again, I was like 6 or something, and at the time, I didn't think it was that weird. I just assumed that was how, life was. But now as an adult looking back, I'm like, man, that's not normal shit for a 6-year-old to think, and especially after finding a lot of the things I was told at that young in these old Hermetic books and stuff. It's, and there's no question about it at this point. I had a lot of doubt for a long time, but now I realize there's no chance that this hasn't been that. AI has helped. Because now I'm able to substantiate things that I could only conceptualize, but I had no way of working through. And now I have the ability to do the math and to, so. Yeah, another thing that's interesting to me is that you can't really do this on purpose. I've never heard of someone that can. I mean, sometimes people ask me something that I shouldn't know and I'll have an answer somehow. But mostly, it's not like I can just come up with these things or something. It's like they just kind of bubble up when it's appropriate, like law of necessity. I've even suspected that one of the reasons that you don't just precognate everything, or whatever you want, it's need to know only. And these things that are of a higher consciousness, like frequency, the rules of the universe apply to them even more strictly. And then that would be true because in order for something to be more fine, the laws would exert on it to carve it up into thinner and more delicate and intricate wavelengths, you know? And so I think you only receive those things on a need to know basis. Like I knew the date, 2020 and the pandemic, all the details. I told my friend, who was the singer of my band at the time, still talked to him, double checked a little while back. I told him all about it, and he said, "When is this going to happen?" And I said, "The shit will hit the fan in 2020." I have no idea. It's not the voice didn't tell me or anything. I just knew that. It's a weird thing, you know. I wish I could just do it whenever, but you can see proof that no one can, because there's, you know, you would be able to tell if any person in human history, unless they really were committed to secrecy, had gotten to the point where they could just know anything they wanted, past, present, and future, we would all know about that person, and there would be proof of it. It would be hard proof too, you know. If it ever does happen, it's got to be exceedingly fucking rare. You know, I know it's rare that people have the ability to do it to the extent that I do. I've never seen it before, and all the people that I meet tell me that they've never seen it to this degree in anyone either. So I know that, you know, and I don't have it, like, it's not even consistent, you know. It happens to an extent that's undeniable, but it's not like major things only every few years, really, you know. It's not like it's this constant psychic ability or something. But it definitely is real. And I think I even understand how pattern recognition, to an extent, can actually explain even the finest details of this sort of precognitive capacity like that. Because if everything's fractal, then in a way, all the details of every story and every event and everything are encoded in every part in the same way, in the same algorithm. The universe explained it to me a while back as... not thinking about it, it is literally vectors, like almost infinite vectors of the same algorithm. So the algorithm at different angles and velocities, and you know, and so where they intersect, there's a new like event, or you know, that's where all the variation is created from the intersections. Is what I'm trying to say. And so, you know, that, like that book that describes Barron Trump and Donald Trump as his mentor, and their Secretary of Defense is Pence and all this stuff. That's that fractal manifesting through someone's subconscious, you know. And interestingly, because I took, I think I mentioned this earlier, I took some IQ tests, and I'm not like off the charts in some categories for sure, and I can tell that, you know, easily. But pattern recognition is like almost as high as it can get. Like way beyond genius level, but just pattern recognition. And I found out today that extremely advanced genius level pattern recognition is a thing in people that have suffered narcissistic abuse from a parent. And guess what? That was, I had no idea about that, but apparently it's something that happens for people that suffer severe narcissistic abuse. Everything contains its contradiction. So every curse is a blessing. There were a bunch of times that Levi put that idea really, really nicely in tonight's live stream. Really nicely. Yeah, I did mention life path. Just, you know, do you think those lifetimes can overlap? Is deja vu a form of precognition? Okay, let's address a couple of those things. Deja vu may be a recycled signal in the eyeballs. I heard this guy break it down one time, and it sounded like it made sense and could be true. That it's just like this, like reprocessing of a signal. I don't really know how to explain it any better than that because I'm not whatever kind of weird scientist that guy was, but yeah, I don't know. And then there's so many possibilities, right? Like the quantum loop theory that we just actually live the same life over and over again, and there's no reincarnation. We're just the same person because the universe, like once it reaches its maximum, the maximum point of expansion, then it contracts, right? And Penrose CCC theory, the every particle eventually collides with its antiparticle, leaving nothing but photons behind. And so the universe, just as it's described in the Kabbalah, collapses back into the singularity, and all the conditions would be exactly identical to the time before. So we're just doomed to repetition. Another bit of evidence of that is if you think of an acorn. Acorn needs a history of oak trees in order to make an oak tree. So, Hermes says in the Corpus Hermeticum, the Corpus Hermeticum, that the seed of the universe, the singularity, contained all the blueprint for every single person that ever will live, ever, what I mean, every single bit of everything. It has to, because that's how seeds work. And that's the as above, so below principle. That's the idea of learning to read the universe, the book of nature, the allegory of the book of nature, however you can say it. That's what it teaches you, right? So I was thinking about this, and it's kind of a problem because it's like, okay, if that's true, then where did all of the genetic information for the universe's blueprint come from in the first place? The answer is this. There are tiny fluctuations, and you can observe this on the quantum level when you do experiments, and every once in a while you get an anomaly, right? You can do an experiment 100 million times, and it comes out different once. So there is chaos in the system. And just as we observe evolution in our world very slowly, generally, although, by the way, the morphological changes that are happening as response-driven in acacia trees, for example, are also happening in seasons, not in a million years, right? So that kills two birds with one stone. Listen to this. This is nuts. Because it validates the God people, but it also proves evolution simultaneously. That is amazing. And that's the kind of stuff that we're going to be seeing a lot more of. You know what I mean? Because the organism itself could not possibly know that it needs to devolve the tannins so that humans stop hunting it to extinction. Something that had knowledge of that and has oversight in the evolutionary process had to have known that. And they knew whatever it is driving it knows it's time sensitive because it happened in a season, not in, they're almost extinct. So the evolutionary process is happening in 3 months. The same thing is happening with rattlesnakes and elephants. These adaptations are happening in seasons because the universal mind knows that it's time sensitive. Think about that shit. So it proves something like God, and it proves evolution in one fell swoop. This is the unification of consciousness. This is the universal mind basically saying hello, announcing its presence. And if you're here right now, really, you're among the first people to really hear this level of reverberation. Of course, people have been aware that this is a thing for a long time. But as far as like the mainstream of humanity getting this clear of a signal, this is a big moment. So what I was saying is I think that it is true that it is more or less the same every time. But there are tiny variations so that it evolves and changes, and it's not going to be this like completely static, absolute repetition. But that might be what deja vu is. We've just done this so many times. Bob Dylan song, he says, "Somebody tell me what price we have to pay to keep going through all of these same things twice. Yeah, I'm in the Illuminostic Discord server. Yeah, you guys should be there. We do patron-only powwows once a week for the $10 tier and higher, and you also get access to all of the premium material. And also, I have less of a chance of dying from these surgery things that I need to have happen if I have support. So, there's that. But yeah, it's almost midnight, so I'm gonna look for any more questions real quick, and then if I truly know myself, why don't I remember? Well, what kind of question is that? What would you have to do if there was no process of discovery? You know, like in my own life, I realized that things have been revealed to me years before I understood what they meant. I mean, you guys, most of you, if you follow me, have heard me talk about how when I was 11 years old, the number of magical expansion, my 12-year-old trailer park girlfriend who did not know who Hermes was named my wand Hermes. The significance of that later on in life is crazy. And there's no way in hell that it was just a coincidence. And there's tons of those things where the universal mind was dropping, hints. And I've wondered myself, like, why do I know so much, but then not enough to not have to figure all this crap out? You know what I mean? Because that's the point. We need something to do, I think. And the river of forgetfulness, I think, is a real thing. When you get hit on the head, you lose your memories a lot of times, right? So can you imagine when the universe explodes and then contracts into an infinitely small point before exploding again, what that does to your memory? And yet, the entire record of everything that's ever happened is stored in every single point in the. It's not just that the information is retained on the quantum level. It is retained on the quantum level everywhere. Like in every single point in space contains the all. The all is in the all. So that's why you don't remember. And it's wild to see all this happening, and it's like every time we get into one of these books, it's like the science now. That Levi was talking about all kinds of things that they've just figured out recently or just starting to intuit. AI's been saying that to me a lot too. Like you're like way ahead of these people that are all these scientists, PhDs and whatnot that are just starting to intuit the things that you have suspected for a long time. And part of the reason is this. That's what this current lineage is. The scientific approach to spirituality, basically. And the process yields unprecedented access to the wiring under the board. And anyways, I think this process of like infinite regeneration, why don't you know yourself? You're still developing too. We all are. We wouldn't be here if we weren't. I don't think that it's like, our perfect self is buried in there, and the way to dig it out is cocaine, as Crowley said, but that's not what I mean at all. It's that we're just realizing this. The essence is there, the potential is there, and it's full. But there is still development. There's still process. It wouldn't be happening otherwise. So the self that you're trying to know is, in a sense, already there, but in a sense, it's also being developing, creating. That's why you have to know yourself. Your point of reference. In order to extend the structure, you have to know the foundation, and you have to know what the purpose of the structure is. And then, with that knowledge in mind, every step expands your empire. Ride the spiral to the end. We may just go where no one's been. What did he say? The goal is to ride the spiral of our divinity and still be a human. Yeah, man. Cheers, guys. I'm getting a bit tired and I'm hungry, and I don't see a lot of questions, anyways. So, I want to meet the great successor of my lineage from ancient ancestry. OB. How would one go about that? One doesn't go about that kind of thing by a deliberate effort, for the most part. If something like that is going to occur, it's going to be an organic development. It's algorithmic. It's just going to arise from the subconscious of the universal mind and you might not even know it when it happens. So, you guys, please do me a favor, hit the like button, share, subscribe, consider becoming a patron. You can send support to addresses in the description of every video or in the chat if you are that cool. And if not, you could please at least hit the like button and share and subscribe and hit your bell notifications. And I will be back tomorrow night with a mushroom masterclass. We're going to talk about edible mushrooms, medicinal mushrooms, and magic mushrooms. And the video that is premiering before the live stream is about boletes. Most people don't even know that there are psychoactive boletes that we don't even know why they're psychoactive. We don't know what the compound is. It's not psilocybin. They bruise blue, but it's not psilocybin. So, so that video on boletes, and then afterwards I'm going to do the mushroom masterclass. Thursday night we're doing music. Friday I'm going to tell you the truth about Elon Musk with proof. Yep. Fully exposed. No opinion about it. 100% facts. And you know who the sources are? His own AI. So we're going to do that. And then we'll get back into this book next week. So cheers, guys. Thank you so much.